Hi everyone, nice to see you all again. I'm going to be telling you a story today, another story from our series about Old Testament heroes. I'm going to be telling you the story about a man called Daniel. Now, Daniel was in the Old Testament, and he was a man that some people would say was a prophet, which meant that he had some special messages from God to tell people. Now, this particular story, this is about when Daniel was working for the king. He was working with 3 other men, and they had a really important job looking after the king. Now, Daniel, he was able to tell the king what some dreams or thoughts meant. So the king soon realised that Daniel was actually a pretty important man, and he decided to make Daniel the most important helper. Now, you can imagine the other guys that he worked with, they really didn't like this very much. There was Daniel getting this promotion at work and being the most important to the king, and they were still working for the king, but they weren't anywhere near as important. Anyway, they were quite jealous, and so they decided that they actually wanted to get rid of Daniel, and they started to try and plot and think how they could go about doing that. They kept watching Daniel to try and trip him up and think of a way that to see what Daniel was doing wrong, that they could maybe get him fired from his job. But do you know what? They couldn't find Daniel doing anything wrong at all. He was just a really good guy. Then one day, one of them said, "Do you know what? I keep seeing Daniel go off to his room 3 times a day, every day." And do you know what Daniel was doing in his room? He was praying. Now, they suddenly had an idea. They made a plan that actually, if they could get the king to make a new law, then the new law was that they were only allowed, the people in the land were only allowed to pray to the king. Maybe they could get Daniel in trouble. They thought they were ever so clever coming up with this idea. So they went and saw the king, and they said, "King, we've got this idea. We think that actually people in this land should only pray to you." And the king was obviously, he was quite flattered. He thought, well, okay, yeah, let's go with that. That sounds like quite a good idea. So this new law was put in place. Now, of course, when Daniel heard about this, he knew what that meant. He knew that he would get in big trouble if he was to be found out, if it was to be found out that he was still praying to God. But you know what? Daniel just did carry on praying though. He knew what he was doing was the right thing. Now the other helpers, they actually went and told the king what Daniel was doing. They purposefully got him in trouble. They went and said, "Do you know what Daniel's doing? Those 3 times a day that he's going off, he's going to his room and he's praying to God. He's breaking the law, isn't he?" And at that point, the king thought, they've tricked me. Now what am I going to do? My favourite helper, my promoted best helper in my kingdom, what am I going to do? And he had to call Daniel, and he said, "Daniel, you've been praying to God. I am going to have to punish you for this." And do you know what the punishment was? It was to be sent into the den of lions. Now, I don't know about you, but there's no way I would want to be anywhere near a lion, let alone a whole den full of lions. But that's what the king had to do. He had to stick to his law. So that night, the king called his soldiers and he said, "Take Daniel to the lions." Poor Daniel. All Daniel could do was pray. He got thrown in with the lions. The king's soldiers shut the door. The king said, "May your God be with you, Daniel." Now that night, the king could not sleep. He was really fond of Daniel and he couldn't sleep. He was worried about what was happening to him, whether he was still alive. So he woke up really early the next morning and he ran out to where the lion's den was. And do you know what he found? He found Daniel. He called him, "Daniel, Daniel, has your God saved you?" And Daniel was there, fine, not a scratch on him. And actually, these big lions, they were sat next to him. They weren't bothered with Daniel at all. They were quite happy having a little snooze, I think. God had protected Daniel all that night. Now, the king obviously thought, well, I'm going to have to make a new law now. I'm going to read you what it says in the book of Daniel in the Old Testament when he made the new law. And it's in the book of Daniel, chapter 6, verse 26 and 27. And the king said, I am making a new law. This law is for people in every part of my kingdom. All of you must fear and respect the God of Daniel. Daniel's God is the living God. He lives forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed. His rule will never end. God rescues and saves people. God does mighty miracles in heaven and on earth. God saved Daniel from the power of the lions. And do you know what? Daniel, he dared to be different, didn't he? He dared to carry on praying to God because he knew that was what was right. That was the right thing to do. Even though all those people around him, they were saying otherwise. And do you know what? When we pray to God and we have God as our friend, he can help us do the right thing. And he can also help us know what the right thing is for us to do. I hope you've enjoyed that story about Daniel today. It's nice to see you all. I hope you're all keeping well and enjoying the sun. Bye.